Imagine a day when the very sky defied its own laws. For one singular day in recorded history, the sun did not move, not slowed, not dimmed. According to the biblical text, it simply froze, suspended in the sky for the length of an entire extra day, while a furious battle raged beneath it in the hill country of Canaan. The passage describing this event is barely 3 verses long, and yet those 3 verses have generated more debate, more scientific speculation, and more theological argument than almost any other passage in the entire Old Testament. The Book of Joshua declares it as fact, without hesitation, without qualification. The sun stood still, and the moon stopped, until the nation avenged itself on its enemies. Is this poetry? Is this history? Is this something else entirely? For more than 2,000 years, no one has fully agreed. To understand why this moment happened at all, you have to understand the trap Joshua was standing in. It is roughly the late 13th century BC. Joshua has led the Israelites across the Jordan River into Canaan, and the conquest is well underway. But a nearby city, Gibeon, had just made a decision that would change everything. Rather than fight Israel, the Gibeonites cunningly tricked Joshua into a peace treaty, disguising themselves as weary travelers from a distant land to hide the fact that their city sat only a few miles away. When 5 Amorite kings discover that Gibeon has defected to Israel's side, they do not forgive the betrayal. They unite their armies and march to destroy the city before Israel can defend it. A desperate plea rips through Joshua's camp at Gilgal. "Come quickly, save us. Do not abandon your servants." Gibeon is under siege, and only Israel can stand in the breach. And here is where the tactical nightmare begins. Gilgal sits down in the Jordan Valley. Gibeon sits up in the hill country, roughly 25 miles away, along a brutal climbing route that rises nearly 3,000 feet in elevation. The text says Joshua's army marched through the entire night to reach them, an exhausting, punishing, forced march undertaken in total darkness, with no guarantee they would arrive in time to save anyone at all. Every mile of that climb was a mile that could still end in failure. They did arrive, and the ambush worked. The Amorite king's armies shattered, fleeing desperately down the pass of Beth Horon as the Israelites pursued. But a relentless pursuit had a ruthless deadline. Night was falling, threatening to erase the victory as darkness prepared to swallow the fleeing enemy whole. Then, at the ultimate moment of truth, with victory hanging by a thread and the last vestiges of light failing, Joshua turned to something no general, no king, no other figure in the entire Bible ever turns to in quite this way. Not a weapon, not reinforcements. He looked up and addressed the sky itself, as if it were the one power left that could still decide the outcome. Before thousands of witnesses he spoke, not in prayer, but in open command. Sun, stand still over Gibeon. Moon, stop over the valley of Ajalon. The text is explicit that Joshua said this in the sight of Israel, not privately, not in a tent, but openly, before an entire exhausted army watching the battle unfold. This was not a whispered plea. It was a public wager, staked entirely on an outcome no one could guarantee, and there was no walking it back. Through an impossible night march, Joshua's army had already crossed one threshold. But the true crossing came now, cosmic, irreversible, witnessed by everyone present. And then, according to the Book of Joshua, it happened exactly as he asked. The sun stopped in the middle of the sky and did not hurry to set for about a full day. Picture it from the ground. Thousands of soldiers, mid-battle, adrenaline burning through exhausted bodies after an all-night march, and above them the sky itself refuses to move. No dusk, no shifting shadows. Imagine the mixture of terror and awe rippling through those ranks as the heavens visibly bent to a human command, holding fixed and impossibly steady for what the text describes as roughly a full day's length, beyond what should have been possible. But the story does not end with victory. The chapter adds something extraordinary as a footnote to this claim. Is this not written in the Book of Jasher? That single cryptic line has puzzled scholars for centuries. The Book of Jasher, referenced only twice in the entire Old Testament, has never been recovered. Its contents are unknown beyond the fragments quoted here. Yet the author of Joshua treats it as an existing, citable historical record, much like a modern writer referencing a newspaper archive or an official chronicle. It is framed not as campfire legend, but as a documented event, verifiable by the audience of its own day. This vanished source only deepens the mystery, leaving scholars for millennia grappling with the same fundamental question: what exactly did the author believe he was reporting? And that question, what exactly was being reported, is where interpreters have split for nearly 2,000 years. The most direct reading takes the text at face value. A literal, physical suspension of the Earth's rotation, or an equivalent astronomical intervention, sustained long enough to secure Israel's victory. Defenders of this view point to the specificity of the language and the public nature of the miracle, witnessed by an entire army, not a single visionary alone in a cave. But a significant body of scholarship reads the passage as poetic hyperbole, drawn directly from the lost Book of Jasher, believed by several scholars to have been a collection of epic battle poetry, similar in style to other ancient Near Eastern war narratives that used exaggerated cosmic imagery to celebrate a stunning victory. In this reading, the sun stood still functions the way we might say a triumph stopped the clock, a vivid metaphor, not a literal astronomical claim. A third interpretation sits between these two. Some scholars propose the phrase describes not a halted sun, but a darkened one, an unusual atmospheric event, perhaps a hailstorm combined with unusual light conditions, an unusual atmospheric event, perhaps a hailstorm combined with unusual light conditions, since the very next verses describe enormous hailstones killing more Amorite soldiers than Israelite swords did. On this reading, the sun being obscured behind storm clouds extended the cooler low-light conditions that made the pursuit easier. Modern astronomers have engaged with the account too, though cautiously. Any literal cessation of Earth's rotation would carry catastrophic physical consequences, and no astronomical or geological record from anywhere in the ancient world corroborates a missing day. Proposed reconciliations remain speculative and are not treated as established science. This is the ultimate test for any interpreter. Embrace the literal, and you face an unexplainable cosmic anomaly with zero external corroboration anywhere on Earth. Choose the poetic reading, and you must reconcile why the author frames it with such matter-of-fact historical confidence, citing an external record as though inviting contemporaries to check his sources. There is no comfortable resting place, only a text that insists on being taken seriously, and a silence from the rest of the historical record that refuses to confirm it either way. Regardless of interpretation, nearly every scholar agrees on this passage's original function: to assert a singular theological claim. With the sun apparently held captive, the Israelite army achieved a decisive, seemingly impossible victory. But this was framed as more than military triumph. It was presented as a divine affirmation, a cosmic declaration of power. In the ancient world, the sun and moon were often worshipped as deities in their own right by surrounding nations. A narrative in which Israel's God commands them to stand still, and they obey, was an unmistakable statement about whose power truly governed the cosmos. The military victory was almost secondary to the point being made. 2,500 years later, the passage remains exactly what it was for its first readers, an assertion too large to simply file away, not because anyone has proven what physically happened over Gibeon that day, but because the account refuses to be reduced to either pure myth or comfortable literalism, insisting instead on being wrestled with directly. That may be the most honest thing that can be said about it. The sun stood still, or the storm gathered, or the poets sang, or something happened that language itself struggled to capture precisely. This enduring, unresolved tension is the real inheritance of the story, a claim of divine authority that continues to provoke more than 3,000 years after it was first written down. What really happened on the day the sun stood still? What is your theory? Share it in the comments below, and if these ancient mysteries fascinate you, the next one is already waiting.